Early bird gets the worm and also gets to hear the beginning of the webinar. So let's go ahead and get started. So today we're going to be talking about something very important topic in my opinion here, just because it's something really misunderstood in Paladin, is the min setting. You know, a lot of systems have a manual min-max setting. I like to call it kind of a gas tank philosophy on inventory. Here's the line. When I fall below it or above it, fill me up or don't have order anymore sort of thing. And that's fine. You know, we got to have items to sell items, of course, but that line is not static. You know, the amount of the min that we have on a gallon of paint or a paintbrush or really anything is not going to be the same in August as it is in December. And if we're manually setting all of these mins and maxes that we want the system to stay between, that's kind of a nightmarish task to do that on 30,000 inventory items. So as many of you know, you let Paladin do it for you, and then it'll go ahead and kind of dynamically set those. It'll steer your mins and maxes to be appropriate to match the current time. Now, or to match the current demand for those needs. It'll make the supply meet the demand. Currently what's going on. So you don't have an excess of inventory just sitting there taking up space, taking up a warehousing cost, and not generating any profit, right? So the whole point is to get the inventory as living and moving as possible. And using Paladin system and understanding the things within it is really important in order to accomplish that goal. So we're going to talk about how this can keep plenty of project items. You can use your min to kind of make sure that you have enough project items on hand for your contractors, even though Paladin may only, you know, it only shows that you sell a few a week. And so it only wants you to keep 4 or 5, maybe 10 of those little items lying around. But we all know that when a contractor comes in and needs to build a new house or something like that, they need X amount always. They always need a vast number of those hinges or maybe face plates for the electronic plugs or things like that, you know. All right, getting a little ahead of myself here. Let's go over our agenda. We're going to unravel the mystery of the minimum display. We're going to talk about when to set it, because there are definitely times that you should set that minimum display. And then there are definitely times, probably more so, that you should not set the minimum display. If you ever find yourself like, I'm going to go through every one of my items and set this, and whatever this is, stop and think about that for a second, because Paladin's system is very much built and designed to automate your processes. We would never build a system that would require you to go into every one of your items and do something on there. I mean, there might be certain situations where you need to do that, and that is appropriate. But if you find yourself going through 400 or 500 items to set up one thing, take a second, slow your roll, and think about what you're doing, because there might be a different, better way to be done, and maybe you're not following one of the best practices. You know, give one of us a call over here and make sure that there's not a shortcut to whatever you're trying to do, because many times there's just a misunderstanding in how the system works, and we're off going this way to work, not realizing we can just take a right turn and get there in 2 minutes, you know. And then how the minimum display padlock works. I think most of us are pretty familiar with the padlocks, but there's a little bit of confusion. Some of them control EDI, and some of them control suggested order. So we're going to talk about that a little bit. This is a pretty easy topic. I mean, this won't take us very long. We'll be here for another 10 minutes or so, maybe a little bit longer, but it's just something that's very misunderstood. So not too complicated, not too lengthy even, but very important in that we want to make sure everyone has a clear understanding as to what's going on here. So the minimum display set for items in the inventory module. Obviously, you go into the inventory module, and then it's order control tab. There's your mins and your maxes. You'll see a little open field, a little padlock next to it. And you'll have Paladin's suggested min and suggested max underneath that. Now, our minimum display is very different from other point of sale systems. Other point of sale systems, it is a keep my stocking level between these two numbers. When I fall below this min, nope, I never want less than 4. Please fill me up above that. Not necessarily how Paladin looks at it. So Paladin, that min, you're basically establishing a new 0. You're saying, hey, 4 is the new 0. We think of it as a display quantity. We don't ever intend for the number put in a 4 to ever be sold. Those are ones that you always want sitting there. which is why usually you just want to leave it alone because you don't want to have always items sitting there, maybe just one of them. The Paladin should keep you from running completely out of your inventory. Maybe not always on every item, but for the most part, it should keep a couple in there. So it should kind of take care of the display quantity on its own. But if you want to say, hey, I want to reestablish 4 as the new 0, and because I have, these set up at end caps, maybe I have one in my checkout lane too, because it's a cool little item and people like looking at it or something. Who knows? And you can go ahead and set that. So keep in mind, you're establishing a new 0. I like this little example down here. If you set the minimum display value to 4, and Paladin Point of Sale calculates an optimum stock on hand value of 8, so once you'd have 8 of those items in there, you have a minimum of 4. Paladin's going to order 8 and give you 12 because it is excluding the 4 as items that are going to be sold because it sees those as a display quantity. So in Paladin's mind, you're never going to be selling those 4. You've got them displayed. You're going to be using stuff. Now, of course, you can always sell them, but just understand that that is how Paladin is thinking of it. When you say, hey, my new min is 4, you're saying, my display quantity, I have 4 on display, thus I will never be ordering those. I want to be ordering above this level. Or I'll never be selling those, I'll be selling any items, any additional items that I have beyond that point. And keep in mind that Paladin's always going to be using its dynamic algorithms to achieve your optimum stocking levels if you let it. If you order through the suggested order report and you follow its recommendations, it's always going to be doing this for you. So you shouldn't have to go in there and manually set a min in that field. It's not a reorder indicator. It's not saying, hey, when I get below 5, order more of these. No, it's saying, hey, I want to always have 5 on display. Now, Paladin, if you don't have 5 on display, you fall below, it will want to get you into that, you told me to maintain this much on display quantity, so it will reorder. It's just thinking about it a little bit differently than we think that it's thinking about it, right? Okay, so when is a good idea to actually set in this minimum display value? Like we were talking about right at the beginning, those little electronic faceplates, or perhaps your Schedule 40 plumbing elbows. Those things maybe get sold once every 3 or 4 months. So Paladin wants you to maintain, a couple of them laying around. But when they get sold, nobody buys 3 or 4. They're buying 30 of them because that's how many they need to accomplish their project, build their house or whatever. So that might be an item where it's okay to say, you know what, Paladin, I know that you think I should be ordering 4 right now, and that's fine. We can go ahead and use suggested to order that, but go ahead and lock in the display value of 25. Now Paladin's going to say, okay, well, you want 25 of these always on display, and it'll never let you fall below that line. It'll order when you get below it. It'll make sure that you have that 25 display quantity value. But you're just kind of tricking Paladin and saying, hey, I'm not really displaying these. I am using them to sell them. Keep in mind, Paladin's going to want to order on top of that min. You have established 40 as the new 0, right? So if you order 5 on top of that, you're going to get a little bit of excessive stock. Inexpensive project items, I have no problem with a ton of hinges being sitting. Okay, with a certain line, we don't want to have a ton of overstock in those little items, but some of those little items that aren't so price sensitive, it's okay to lock in a display quantity and have a little bit of more of them sitting there to accomplish those projects when they come in. When a multiple end cap displays, you have this item displayed in 2 different spots in the store. Well, obviously, if you have one not locked into your minimum display quantity, Paladin's only going to make sure that you have one of those on display or set aside for display as a non-sellable stock keeping unit. So put 2. If you have 2 different spots that you're displaying this item, make sure that you have those items there to display, obviously. And then a hunch sale item. If you have an idea that a certain amount of sales are going to be coming because of the weather or because that the church is remodeling their roof, whatever the reason, you can go ahead and start kind of steering Paladin's ordering ship a little bit by locking in your own mins based off of some hunches that you may have. Again, Paladin doesn't know the weather, so if you want to kind of push or pull those figures a little bit, you can. I really hope that we don't do this too much, though, because as soon as you lock in a minimum, you're just kind of excluding Paladin from being able to be intelligent for you, and you'll probably end up ordering a little bit too much stuff, because Paladin, again, is going to order on top of that minimum that you've established. So why you should not use this minimum display value? Well, Paladin, as we all know, has a built-in restocking optimization system. So don't spend all day. The whole philosophy and point here is to not spend all day in the back office pushing buttons, knobs, and levers, controlling these reorder points, trying to wrangle your software to see your inventory properly. It's to allow Paladin to do it for you, freeing up your time so you don't have to. So the more you lock in an item, the more you're saying, Paladin, I'm going to need a little bit more manual control over the reorder point for this item, or the minimum display, rather, for this item. And you're just removing its ability to think and be intelligent for you. You should try to hold off from doing that on some items. If you set the minimum display value, you may overstock your inventory. You're going to overorder your items. Why is that? Well, as we gave in the example, if you want 6 items there and you lock in a display quantity of 6, hey, I know we want to have less than 6. Well, Paladin thinks that you should have 6 too. It's going to now order 12 because you said, hey, 6 of these I'm never going to sell. They're my display quantity. And then Paladin goes, well, you need 6 to sell, so I'm going to order 6 more. Right, and then you're going to have 12. You're going to have twice the stock that you wanted on that item because you didn't understand how the minimum display worked. So kind of a best practice here is if you believe your customer demand can support a larger supply of that item, go ahead and order a larger quantity. Don't set your minimum to be higher. Just order a larger quantity and see if the current demand can support the supply that you order for those items. And Paladin will adjust itself accordingly based off of the sales that are driving its math one way or the other. So order a little bit more, that's not a problem, and see what Paladin has to say for itself. See if it thinks that's a good idea or not. It'll kind of push those figures for you. And then the padlock. Now, most of the padlocks work, if they're EDI control fields. You know, you lock it, do not allow my EDI supplier to control this field. You unlock it, I do want them to allow them to control this field. Very similar to how this works, but this has nothing to do with EDI. This is just in how the suggested order system works, and we're just talking about the little padlocks right by the minimum and the maximum quantity fields. When that padlock is locked, that's saying that Paladin Point of Sale will recognize this value, meaning it will recognize the value that you have manually put into that field as opposed to its value that it's created with its algorithm system. If you unlock it, it will not use the value that you have in there. So if you're like, oh, I have this item in 3 different spots in my store, so I need at least a 3 min display quantity. So I put a 3 in there, and then you don't lock it, Paladin won't use that figure. It'll still go ahead and use its suggested figure as opposed to yours. You have to put it in there and then lock it, and then Paladin will go ahead and respect your value as opposed to it. I'm going to pull up my little control panel. I'm flying alone today. Make sure that we don't have any questions. Does anyone have any questions here? I want to make sure I'm not going too fast. Okay, very good. So just keep in mind, everybody, that we are establishing a new 0. We are saying, hey, the minimum order quantity, these are items that I want on display. I never intend to sell them. Now, you can use it to account for your project items like we talked about. Just understand how it's working so you don't accidentally order too much goods. That's the whole point here. All right, guys, next week we're going to be talking about how to upsell properly and how to use the software specifically to remind us of upsales and things that we can do to generate a little bit more profit out of our customers sometimes. You know, I was reading a thing the other day, and it's extremely expensive, sometimes hundreds of dollars for a new store to board for a store to board a new client, right? With marketing and reaching out to them, all these things. But it can be way, way cheaper to maximize your current clientele, the clients that you already have coming into the store, making sure that you are purchasing or you're maximizing the potential and you're selling, being kind of their one-stop shop for everything. We have a question here. Can we clarify the difference between the min field and the max field? So Paladin, the min is saying, I want to set these items aside as a display quantity. I want no less than 4 of these items ever, and I really don't intend to sell them. So please order on top of that min. And then the max field is saying, I never want more, and it works just the same way with the locks. Paladin will try to establish its own, but if you lock in I don't ever want more than 10 of these, now Paladin will go ahead and it'll keep you on top of your min with no more than your max, right? If you have a max of 20, Paladin will never order 25 because you've told it, hey, I don't ever want us to have more stock than 25 by putting in your 25 max and locking the little padlock. So Paladin will put you on top of your min, but not over your max. All right, guys. So yeah, come join us. I don't believe it's next week. It's going to be March 28th. We're kind of pulling back a little bit on our webinars as we've been doing this for a little over a year now, and we're getting to the point where we're not running out of topics per se, but a little bit. We've got a lot of them under our belt so far. In fact, I think we've had a few redundancies where I'm like, I'm doing a webinar tomorrow, and then we're like, actually, we already did that topic. We just didn't remember because it was so long ago that we did it. So. And the reason for that is you guys keep coming and watching and keep motivating us to continue providing this education and making sure that people know what's what in our software. So it's fun, so please keep joining us here. This next one should be pretty cool about how to use the software to upsell clientele, and that's going to be going on Tuesday, March 28th.